The Canon 1DX Mark III is the best DSLR for video, period. Chris here from Videomaker. If you shoot video, this is the last review you need to watch about the 1DX Mark III. You found the right one, stick around and watch till the end. If you like our videos, consider subscribing and don't forget to turn on the bell so you get notifications as we put out new content twice a week. If you want to skip to any part of this video, there's timecode in the description. Let's get started. So we know what you're thinking. The 1DX Mark III is $6,500. Why choose a DSLR at that price for shooting video? Well, we'll tell you. The Canon 1DX Mark III is the best DSLR that Canon has ever made and leads by miles over the others in the market. And it even includes full-frame 4K. It's not perfect, but it's quite close. With the release of this camera, Canon tops just about every spec offered outside of a cinema camera. Starting off, the camera is not small. In fact, the Mark III is big. With media and battery, the Mark III weighs 3.17 pounds. Now, that's a bit lighter, 90 grams, than the Mark II, but it's still large. Outside of the heft, it feels fantastic in your hand. The grip is deep and has a very nice grip texture. Canon has moved all of the ports to one side, making everything much easier to reach than with the Mark II. The camera doesn't have raw HDMI output, but instead offers UHD 4K at 10-bit 422 out the HDMI. A big bummer for this camera is its lack of any articulation from the monitor. Pair that with the brightness of the screen and it might leave you having to use the viewfinder. The screen does get brighter than the standard, but it's not enough to battle any glare from the static screen. The menu for the Mark III is not bad. It's very typical for Canon. However, it's not the simplest menu to choose resolution and frame rate. It has 29 variations to choose from, and it's easy to choose the wrong one. Not only is that menu difficult to engage 10-bit shooting, there isn't a 10-bit on-off option in the menu. To turn on 10-bit, you have to use the Canon log menu and turn on C-Log, making the video capture 10-bit from 8-bit. The 1DX Mark III has the typical shoot assist you might need, like peaking, zebras, a histogram, and audio meters. It has a log assist mode that puts a LUT on the monitor or out the HDMI, making exposure easier. Like on Canon cinema cameras, when shooting EF still lenses, you get a manual focus assist that's different than other non-cinema Canon cameras. The Mark III is one of the first cameras out with new media type, CFexpress. Not only that, but they give you two slots with the same media. This allows you to shoot raw stills on both cards at the same time for real-time backup, or you can capture 12-bit RAW on one card and either 8-bit or 10-bit proxy on the other. However, there isn't a way to capture an 8-bit proxy while shooting a 10-bit file at the same time. One of the main differences between what this camera can do and one of Canon's cinema cameras is that it has a record limit time of 30 minutes. A 64GB card is $150 for 426 megabytes per dollar. When you buy a larger card, the gigabyte per dollar comes down. But keep in mind, the best price per gigabyte, a 512GB card, will set you back $600. Being able to shoot internal 12-bit is awesome, but it creates some other problems. Like it's up to 2600 megabits per second CRM files when shooting RAW at 60 frames per second. The only drawback outside of needing loads of computer power is when shooting at the top frame rate in full frame 4K above 30 frames per second. The camera doesn't offer any autofocus. The autofocus in the Mark III is really good. Let's take a look at a few examples of the autofocus on this camera. Yes, the 1DX Mark III offers full frame 4K with no crop. This is big for Canon. We're glad that they are keeping up with their contemporaries. Along with full frame capture, there is also a pixel for pixel DCI 4K option with a 1.3 times crop. Additionally, the Mark III offers a crop when using digital image stabilization. There are two digital options, digital and enhanced, offering two different crops. The camera only has digital stabilization. Let's take a look at a shot from the camera with no image stabilization. Now with optical image stabilization on from the lens. Now with just digital stabilization on by itself. Lastly, with enhanced digital stabilization on. You can also combine either digital stabilization modes with optical image stabilization. Optical image stabilization is worth using, but you would be better off doing digital stabilization while editing, giving you more flexibility on how the stabilization is done. The camera has rolling shutter. It's not the worst we've seen, but it's there. It's not as bad when shooting 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. This camera has Morie. We noticed it in all capture modes. Fine lines will dance on you. It's not horrible, but will cause issues when shooting extra fine lines. Moving on to the camera's mic preamp, typically if you're going to use a mic with a DSLR or mirrorless camera, it's better to supply the gain from the mic, that is if it has it. Let's take a listen to our test of the amount of noise in the preamp. Okay, so this is the camera just one notch above 0 on the input, so you're not using much of the preamp on the camera. This is just coming out of the Rode Videomaker NTG, going out it into the microphone input with the gain up on the microphone, not on the camera. Now we're listening to the mic preamp of the camera only. The Rode Videomaker NTG is on 1 and all the rest of the gain is from the camera. As we do with all of our cameras we review, we tested the low light performance. To do this, we did an ISO ramp to see when noise is introduced into the image and when noise color shifts or when the noise is too abundant. This shows us how high of an ISO a shooter can expect to shoot without degrading the image. When shooting in 5.5K RAW, the noise was introduced into the picture at ISO 1600 and significant noise starts at ISO 12800. Above that, the noise starts to color shift. When shooting in crop mode, we saw a stop higher performance with noise starting at ISO 3200 and not color shifting at all, but at ISO 25600 there is a significant amount of noise. This is a very good low light performance for a DSLR and is consistent with the typical low light performance from a mirrorless camera. The SEPA rating for stills is 2,850 shots per battery when using the optical viewfinder, and 610 shots when using live view. Expect to get up to 2 hours of video capture per battery, though it's likely you'll run out of media long before that. One thing we would have liked to see with the Mark III is the ability to charge the camera via its USB-C port. The dynamic range of this camera is dramatically different depending on what bit depth you are capturing. When shooting in 12-bit RAW, we saw 15 stops of dynamic range. In 10-bit, it goes down to 12 stops, and in 8-bit, just 10 stops. We're glad the camera offers 10-bit mode because you get a good enough dynamic range and a smaller file size. If its price tag doesn't scare you away, the 1DX Mark III is a wonderful camera. It's got amazing autofocus for stills or video. It captures up to 12-bit RAW internally to new CFexpress cards, but also gives 10 and 8-bit capture capability, even recording alongside RAW as a proxy. Yeah, it's $6,500, but it's the most capable DSLR in history up to this point. Canon came out swinging with this heavy hitter. It's nice to see Canon leading in innovation, giving all other brands a lot to live up to. It's a fantastic sports and wildlife stills camera, and its video features are to be revered by all others. We like the 1DX Mark III a lot. It's a great camera. I've been Chris from Videomaker, and until next time, keep doing the hard work that you do. Bye-bye.
Continued learning and practice, as well as taking refreshers on the basics, will help keep your skills sharp. Check out our video courses to stay on top of your game. Find a course by visiting videomaker.com/courses or click the link in the description.